G'day and welcome to the AustrAlien podcast. I am your host, TJ Hollis, as always, and with me is the voice of the people, Mr. Shawn Mills. Shawn, how you doing? What's the poop, fella?
Mate, I'm doing great. Doing fantastic. Near the end of the year. It's that weird week between Christmas and New Year's where you're never quite sure what day it is and you're never quite sure what you should be doing.
I can absolutely attest to that. I have been one day ahead for the last 3 days, and it wasn't until the drummer that I'm working with tomorrow gave me a phone call today and said, so we're all good for tomorrow, and I almost had him setting up at the bar tonight.
Nice.
Until I realised that today was still Thursday.
Well, the bar might have had a free gig, a solo drummer.
I'm sure that's exactly what they would have loved too. So as you said, it is that last week of the year, that last week of 2016, or 12,016 if you wish to use the Holocene calendar, as I'm seeing a lot of people are starting to do. So it's what we're hoping to do from now on is have a wrap-up episode for the year, at the end of every year, where we discuss the things that have happened. This is going to be a bit more of a lighter episode for any of our listeners out there. We're going to be maybe touching on a few things, but not getting too in depth. And we're going to go into discussing more of the pop culture phenomenons and things that happened this year. Some of the celebrities, some of the sports, TV, movies. So I hope you guys stick with us and enjoy it. And yeah. Shawn, is there anything you particularly wanted to start with this week?
Well, I think we start with the heavy stuff and work our way lighter. First thing off the top of my head was the Australian elections this year.
Yes, as we both said pre-show, we kind of had a bit of a giggle and it was like, oh yes, that was absolutely this year. That was only in July.
Yeah.
Seems like the last 6 months have felt so crazy and so busy for everyone that, it's hard to remember that actually was still this year.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was thinking about that. Obviously, we've had a very barely re-elected coalition government under Malcolm Turnbull. So, interesting thing about the election, of course, was it was a double dissolution election, which I believe is the first one in my lifetime, or the first one I've certainly voted in, where both halves of the Senate go. So
it's absolutely the first double dissolution election in my voting career.
May have been one in the early 80s. I'm not sure, but So not that it made much difference on the day, and I don't think it worked out too well for the government.
I don't think it worked out too well for anyone on either side of politics, to be honest.
No. Well, I think it's all about the Senate, isn't it? And Turnbull wanted a better Senate. I don't know if he got that or not.
I personally don't believe that he did. I think that he certainly got a Senate that had a lot more minor parties than he would have liked, and more independents than he would have really liked. I think that in the end, both major parties really got a little bit of a kick in the teeth, as a reminder that people are starting to very much get sick of the same old, and that there's a lot of voter apathy in this country right now, where people are believing that all politicians are just the same.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see in the upcoming Queensland elections, which I believe we're getting next year in 2017.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
I think we're going to start to see a bit of that in who gets elected. We're going to see a bit more of a minor party presence being felt. Obviously, One Nation, and I also think that the Greens are going to get possibly 2 or 3 seats.
So tell me your tip. What's your tip for the Queensland election? Keep in mind that we now have compulsory preferential voting in Queensland due to Labor's dirty midnight deal on that one. Do you think the minority Labor government under Palaszczuk will stay, or?
I do. I believe that we will still get a minority government with Palaszczuk, and it will be the Labour Party.
Yeah.
However, they will then have to make a choice between forming a minority government either with One Nation, who I believe are going to get maybe 10 seats.
Okay, yep.
Or they're going to have to form a minority government with the Greens and possibly a few independents.
Well, I can't see Labor siding with One Nation. I mean, One Nation's on the right side of politics, so I don't mean the correct side of politics. I mean the right side of politics. So,
yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
they're quite the right-wing party.
Yeah. So they're to the right of the National Party. So that's interesting. You think it'll still be a sort of a minority or a very slim majority. I actually think Labor's going to trounce it.
Really?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why do you believe that?
Well, I hate to say this because I think it's one of the most ineffectual and boring governments I've ever seen in my life. But I think the LNP opposition's pretty hopeless. There's nothing interesting there. There's nothing going for them that I can see. And I think Labor's going to throw a bit of stink from the Campbell-Newman years at the LNP during the election. And that's going to resonate a bit. And I also think One Nation is going to bite into the vote. I think One Nation's going to bite into the vote. I think it's going to bite in on the right more than the left. And with compulsory preferential voting, I don't think One Nation will get anywhere near the 10 or 12 seats that they got in 98 last time they had a huge upswing. But, they'll get around the 20-25% of the vote. But if the Nationals, or the LNP I should say, but, those traditional National Party seats out west where that tend to fall One Nation, I think if they fall... I think the One Nation vote will probably push the Nationals over the top in those seats. I think it'll be a toss-up. I think what you'll find, 1 and 2 on the ballot, on the count, will be One Nation and the LNP, those traditional National Party seats. I think. So
you think it might be a bit of a toss-up between who actually gets a lot of those traditional Western Queensland National Party seats. So you think it might swing? They will swing between the two of One Nation and National.
Yeah, you look at those seats like the seats of the ones around Longreach and Barcaldine and Mount Isa and those areas, and not the seats that are actually in those cities, but the seats that surround those areas. The one like the Lockyer Valley, even down south, and they tend to be like 70% LNP or National Party vote. And if 30% flip to One Nation, it's still going to be a National Party seat. It's just going to be a National Party on preferences.
Well, I think that's a very interesting call.
But do you agree? Do you think where do you think the One Nation... We both seem to think that One Nation's going to do well. Where do you think their votes are going to come from?
Personally, I believe that, yes, you're going to see a fair percentage of their votes are going to come from, people that would traditionally vote towards a National Party, especially out west. But I think we're going to see a lot of regional areas, a lot of the Labor vote in some towns is going to go towards One Nation. I think in Rockhampton you'll absolutely see that.
Yep. And
I think in Mackay you'll see that up north in around the Mackay area.
Yeah. So I guess you're talking the Labor vote that I would probably class as a more traditional Labor vote, not the more modern Labor vote.
Absolutely. The more conservative wing of the Labor Party, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. More the workers.
Yes, more the workers.
Yeah. As opposed to, I guess, what the right wing call your cafe latte Labor voters.
Yes, the sort of people who sit there on Twitter.
Hey, I'm on Twitter. You're on Twitter.
Do you want to give yourself a quick plug?
Sure. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Shawn Mills 100. Always
and I'm
happy to listen to anyone's rubbish because my Twitter feed is full of my rubbish.
That is very, very true. And I'm at at Teej34. That's at TEEJ34, I believe. It's been so long since I've actually had to say it out. No, I am at TJ Rule 34.
Nice.
Nice, can't even get my own Twitter handle correct.
So we're just on the ball.
Absolutely.
We are men of the people.
That is fantastic. Well, of course, 2016 didn't have just the Australian election. It also had the American election in November, which we touched on briefly last episode.
We did.
And very, very briefly, just a
Sure.
little spot. And so, of course, as not many people really saw coming, we now have President-elect Trump in the USA.
Yep.
Who is already throwing his weight around internationally, having called the president of Egypt and pressured him to drop a UN resolution. But what we were also very surprised to see in this election was we were starting to see the inner workings of the American political system in a way that we haven't seen in many, many years. People in America are starting to get more educated, the average voter, I should say, in America, as to what is a super PAC and what it has to do with the US political system. We're starting to see a lot more transparency, although maybe not an intentionally on the parts of the two political parties.
I think we're seeing transparency in the fact that people are seeing some of this dodgy stuff that both parties are doing and have been doing. And
that's why
it's
I'm
just
saying not
endemic in the
intentionally.
system.
Absolutely, that's why I'm saying not intentionally on the case of the parties.
Oh,
We're starting to see some of the really bad things that are going on inside the parties, in the pre-selections and in the nominations for primaries.
America, if I could say something to you, get rid of your primary system. It stinks. It's
Absolutely.
ridiculous. It's crazy that this rubbish goes on for 9 months before the elections. No wonder your people want to toss out the government of the day by the end of it. They're just angry about having to listen to it. We're half a world away, and we had nothing but Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and all of the other candidates going on and on and on. Bernie Sanders.
The champion of the people, Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, who I'm a big fan of. I must admit, I am a big fan of Bernie.
Possibly the only political individual in the world that you and I agree on.
Nah, that's true. You're a big fan of Margaret Thatcher as well, aren't you?
I'm not, no.
Oh my goodness! That was just crazy. The amount of politics that we had to deal with, that Australians had to deal with. I just pity. I pity all of my friends. I've got a number of friends in the States, and I pity every single one of them having to live through that election campaign. But thank God it's over.
Of course, there was a way that we in Australia didn't have to deal with this. Switch off Facebook.
Well, yes, except for people like yourself and myself who use it for business.
True.
Where you don't have much of a choice. So.
But a lot of this stuff still wasn't mainstream media in Australia. Like, we'd get the occasional short piece of, oh, look, Hillary Clinton has beaten Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
Oh, look, here's another little video clip of Donald Trump ranting and saying something offensive to somebody.
Yep.
And we'd get those on the news. But if it wasn't for social media, the average Australian wouldn't have seen much of this.
No, well, that's very true. So I guess it's an election where social media really played a big role, I guess, settling Australians' minds about an election we usually have a bit of interest in, but we don't really care that much.
I would love to see Australians, the average Australian voter, become as knowledgeable about Australian politics as they are about American politics right now.
Like, I'd be
Because
happy
I
if
believe that social media, because we literally just had the Australian election and then the American election, one right after the other.
Yeah, on top
and
of each
I
other.
saw more interest in the American election on social media from Australians than I saw for the Australian election.
Is that because the Australian elections were just so boring? I mean, I say that as someone who I have a great respect for politics. I think it's very, very important. That doesn't extend to all politicians, of course, but it was a really boring election campaign. And I think it was boring because the coalition tried to run a positive campaign with not a great track record.
I don't believe that they have a I honestly don't believe that the coalition at the moment has much practice in running positive campaigns right now. Ever since the Howard years, my entire voting life, I've seen the vast majority of coalition campaigns, certainly in federal elections, have always focused on this is how bad the other person is. This is how bad Labor is. This is how bad the Greens are. This is how bad Labor's candidate is.
Well, when Mark Latham's the Labor candidate, it's very easy to throw mud. I agree. I think it's on both sides, though. I think.
Absolutely.
I think it's the negative campaigning. I think it threw Labor off for the first couple of weeks of the campaign in Australia that the coalition weren't attacking. Turnbull ran around just talking, jobs and growth, jobs and growth, jobs and growth, and
hashtag spendometer.
Yeah, and all of that sort of stuff. So he tried to keep a positive campaign. Not to say there weren't negative threads or digs at the other side in it, but by and large, the advertising was all fairly positive. And then about halfway through the campaign, I noticed that Labor's stuff became quite positive as well. This is our positive, what was Shorten's slogan? Positive plan for Australia, something like that. Mm-hmm. So 100 positive points, something along those lines. Anyway, he had the big bus with his head on it. You know what? You want to talk about something funny about the Australian elections? I think it was very funny when you had people looking at the shape of Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull's heads to determine whether people liked them or not.
I missed this.
You missed that one? Well,
I missed this one.
The basic recap of this research, and I use research in inverted commas here, is that Malcolm Turnbull has a symmetrical face where everything's lined up, so he's more accepted subconsciously by people, whereas Bill Shorten has a sort of a more triangular head where he's slightly bigger at the top and going down, and therefore he's not as trusted.
Interesting. So they're using that sort of psychological take.
Well, I think they're trying to fill up newspaper columns.
That is very true. So what's next? Do we get phrenology?
Well, I guess so. Palm reading, tea leaves.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I Ching.
Well,
I Ching. We could do I Ching for Pauline Hanson.
Well, why not? As long as it's halal, she'd be quite happy, I suppose.
Okay, but one thing I did notice is the Australian election was very similar to the American election, where it was really the battle of two unlikable candidates. And
yeah, definitely.
Even though both parties in the Australian election tried to put out positive messages and positive campaigns, which I will absolutely be the first to put my hand up and say, thank you. Thank you, both parties, for at least attempting to make it about the issues and not try to vilify the other person, although there was some of that done.
Yeah, but that's fun.
But
not when it's the whole campaign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's not exactly good for the future of the country.
Yeah,
It's
that's
divisive
true.
again. But we had two very unlikable candidates, and the difference is they were just two very boring candidates. Whereas in the American election, we had two very unlikable candidates. And like in Australia, it was people voting for the lesser of two evils. But they were very good at keeping newsworthy. Although I very much think that the reasons Hillary were in the news are reasons that she would not have liked to be in the news for,
Yeah.
such as the hacking of the DNC, her
Yeah.
being brought up with the FBI for the email scandal, and even there was a lot of negative focus and negative attention on her handling of the Benghazi situation.
Yeah. I don't know who I would have voted for in that election. Trump makes some good points, but I don't think I could have voted for him. I think I genuinely wouldn't have voted. I do feel sorry for Hillary in some respects because I think a lot of the stuff that the media threw at her and picked it up off Trump, but a lot of the stuff that she was under was rubbish. It was, any other candidate at any other time, it would have just been, yeah, whatever, moving on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think some of that was Trump's as well, but a lot of Trump's was self-inflicted. So
now this is very interesting. My mother recently had the opportunity to spend time with a Hollywood actor. I'm not going to name names, but he was over on the island that she works on, and she had the chance to spend some time and have a few drinks and have lunch with him. And he's been a friend of Donald Trump's for about 30 years.
Okay.
A close personal friend. And it's very interesting because he said that Donald Trump was always one of the most left-wing people he'd ever known.
Yep.
And for someone working in Hollywood, that's kind of quite impressive.
Yeah.
And that all of his friends, to a T, have no idea where a lot of the things he said have come from. And I'd like to, whether this is all true or not, this is hearsay, so this is conjecture, so take it with the, shaker of salt.
Yeah.
I would like to see how true that is. I would be very interested to see if this privately was the man who was very, very left-wing and apparently very, very passionate about equal rights and a lot of other issues such as that.
Mm.
But we're going to move on from here because in politics there was more than just the Australian and American elections. There was also Brexit, happened in June, so just before our election.
Brexit.
Which, again, just like the Trump winning the US election, just like the sudden popularism of one nation in Australia, nobody saw Brexit coming.
Yeah.
No one foresaw that would have passed.
Look, I know a lot of people criticise David Cameron, the then UK Prime Minister, for having the referendum, but I actually think it was a good thing. I think it was a good thing to have the referendum. He was against it. He was against exit. It's interesting. It'll be interesting now that the furor's died down a bit. I wonder if it's going to be as big a deal as everyone thought. Everyone was, the end of the world is nigh, was sort of happening in July. I wonder if that's actually going to be the case now.
I think it's I think it's certainly going to be a big change for Britain.
Yep.
And if it actually goes ahead, because it hasn't gone ahead yet.
No, that's true.
If it actually goes ahead, there's been a lot of talk that Scotland will have another independence referendum, because one of the big reasons that Scottish voters who voted to stay in the UK voted that way was because they wanted to continue to be part of the EU.
Yeah.
And the issue is that a lot of the UK's mineral wealth and oil wealth is all in Scotland.
Yep.
It's a lot of its primary industries are based in Scotland. So if Scotland leaves the UK, it's going to financially impact England, Northern Ireland, and Wales in a very, very big way.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. I think, I'm absolutely right. I think it is going to have a huge impact. Is it going to impact on Australia? I actually think it could be quite a positive impact if the government plays it right, as in our government.
Oh, absolutely. It's all going to be, whether our politicians know how to use these situations correctly.
Yeah.
To put Australian interests first.
We'll see. It's a big change in the world.
Absolutely.
A lot of changes in the world. In 2016,
Yes,
I've seen a remarkable move to the right in a lot of countries.
Absolutely. It has been a very big swing to the right this year.
Not just the soft right, the hard right.
Yes.
Not just a centre right like we are.
Look at it this way. The current big social talking point in America right now is that the KKK and the neo-Nazis, these are people who have been vilified for these beliefs, now being, rightly so, absolutely, are now being seen in a softer light, because they're now going under the name the alt-right.
I hate that expression.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely hate that expression. It locks way too many people in with those nut jobs like the KKK and the neo-Nazis and stuff. Basically, anyone who's a right-winger or expresses a view that's even slightly anti-immigration or something. People might have a reasoned view that comes down on the anti-side of something, and they get lumped in with that. I hate that expression. Anyway.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean. It's like these people who are pushing very nasty policies. And I'm sure that most of our listeners will agree that, the last thing we need is the Nazi Party to come back or the KKK to get power again.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure no matter what your belief system is, that you can see what is inherently wrong with those situations.
Yeah.
That these people are now using this alt-right term to be pushed in with other people who, like you said, some of them may have reasoned views, but who aren't on the level of hate mongers.
Oh, you get, it's the baby and the bathwater, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's the issue there. So, yeah, but there you go, eh? So, big year in politics.
Absolutely. And speaking of other big changes in politics, there was an attempted coup in Turkey in July.
Yeah, big one.
Again. Yes, and that was very, 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 very interesting to see what would happen. Now, I, from the limited research that I have done on this, it seems that there is a Muslim government in Turkey.
Correct, yes.
And that there was a military coup to try and take over parliament. And what the flag that they were waving for this was, there is a clause saying that if ever the government in Turkey gets predominantly Muslim or predominantly Christian, that it is the duty of the army to hold a coup and to take over so that the government can be balanced again.
Yep.
because, for all of our listeners who aren't very familiar with Turkey, Turkey has a very large Christian population and a very large Muslim population as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what the leader of the army and the leader of the coup was claiming, and now we don't have any proof of this, we don't have any solid proof, I should say, is that he was claiming that the reigning Muslim party was making it easy for the Islamic State to basically use Turkey as an import-export point.
Yep. As sort of
to allow,
base.
yes, to allow to allow people to get in and become members of ISIS, or for them to smuggle out people that they want to send on terrorist activities across the globe.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the Turkish president, is now he held a very, very bloody anti-coup. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, don't know the word for that, but yeah.
Exactly.
The
an anti-coup.
An anti-coup, yeah.
Where he is now, where basically anyone who was involved with the coup was pretty much just taken and shot. And he has been calling for other countries, even still now, that if they have people of Turkish descent in their countries who are saying that the coup was a good thing, that they need to be immediately sent back to Turkey. The most famous of these being Enes Kanter, the NBA basketball player, who plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and who has very publicly spoken about how his family, who are big Turkish loyalists, have disowned him for basically siding with a Turkish imam in Philadelphia, who Turkey is now trying to get sent back. Extradited, thank you.
Yeah, look, the other thing is, the Turkish government, the president there, tried to basically smear the uprising as a US backed coup. I don't know if there's any evidence of that or not, except that there's a former close political ally of the president. They had a big falling out. He lives in Pennsylvania, and the president tried to demand his extradition, and Washington said no. So that's the sort of crux of them, I guess, saying why the US started the coup or whatever. But he's squashed the uprising big time. Over 100,000 officials arrested or fired. That's pretty big.
That is
closed a massive array of media outlets. I think, unfortunately, it's Turkey was one of the few democratic Muslim countries, and I think, although they're still technically a democracy, they're probably a far weaker democracy now than they were at the beginning of the year. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I know it's not a good thing, so bit of a worry.
Absolutely. I think the rest of the world needs to be very, very careful in the way that we handle this in future, because the US has spoken many times about its want to have democracy in the Middle East, but in saying that, the US can't leave these countries that it gets embroiled in only to let them fall to that style of government.
Absolutely.
Because the scariest thing that, and you touched on this then, is that in this coup, the media was silenced. You weren't allowed to, not only was the media silenced, social media was silenced.
Yeah, they cut some of the big internet cables into the country, from what I understand.
Absolutely. Facebook was blocked, Twitter was blocked, even to the point, I believe they said MySpace was blocked. Because
must be worried about it.
Yeah. Apparently people are using MySpace still.
Well, there you go. I'm sure I still have a MySpace account somewhere.
I believe I have one for an old band. Anyway, so one last big event of 2016 before we get into the lighter things
Yep.
was the Zika virus in January.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, not exactly cool, people died.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Look,
But
yeah. Well,
yes,
see
yes, it was.
that was an interesting one, wasn't it? That was, for me, I thought at first I put it in a bit with the bird flu and the pig flu and swine flu and all the other flus that we tend to have. There's a big travesty every year. There's a new flu, something like that. But this one was actually pretty bad. So
Absolutely, and there are still cases of Zika in America right now,
mm.
in the USA. And it was such a big deal that even come the Olympics, there were athletes who've trained their whole life for the Olympics, mind you, saying that they were not going to go and compete because they were afraid of their health, including people such as LeBron James.
Scary, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you see the roster of the US basketball roster as an example, just how absolutely gutted that was. So many people refusing to play for the US team because they were afraid of Zika.
Yeah.
But this brings me to a little bit of a soapbox moment, if you will, where Zika and Ebola that was happening in Africa as well.
Mm-hmm.
We always see so many people in Western nations talking about, why are we spending so much money on foreign aid? Can't we see all this stuff here that needs the money? And it is the Zika virus and Ebola virus in particular. These are two highlighted reasons of why we do spend all this money on foreign aid.
Yeah.
Because I want the listeners just to think about it as, imagine this as an insurance. Imagine this is like your house insurance or contents insurance, but this is for a country. This is a country's health insurance. If we as a country spend money and give foreign aid and pay for doctors and medical supplies to go to these countries that aren't as well developed, they don't have the same infrastructure that we do, and if we spend this money on containing these epidemics and making them as harmless as we possibly can, would that not just pay for itself thousands of times over compared to the cost of what happens when Ebola or Zika or whatever the next flu, your next swine or bird flu is? What happens if that gets to Australia or the USA and starts running havoc over here?
Yeah.
Imagine how much that is going to cost our country, not only in tax dollars spent, on our health system and that sort of thing, but also how much it's going to cost our economy in man hours going down, in death, in people not being able to work because either themselves or a family member has gotten sick and they've got to look after the family member.
Yeah.
And they can't work for that. So imagine that all this foreign aid that we're spending on that is our country paying for health insurance.
Yep.
And I take it one step further. What if, and I'm borrowing this idea from Dan Carlin, what if we had a grant for, let's say 30 people every 6 months, 30 nurses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even talking doctors here. I'm just talking regular nurses.
Yeah.
And we had a grant that for 6 months of their time, just working as a general nurse over in somewhere where Ebola's starting to break out or Zika's starting to break out, we give them $200,000 to take 6 months of their life. Maybe they have to spend a month in quarantine once they get back to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
But this is life-changing money.
Yeah, definitely.
But trust me, for somebody on a nurse's wage, this is life-changing money.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And say we spend $12 million a year and give 60 nurses, to 60 nurses, 12 million between the 60 nurses, $200,000 for 30 of them to do 6 months
Yep.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And then when they finish up, 30 others to go over there.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider that a great use of public funds, considering that this is something that is going to help stop these things coming to Australia?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, even if you have to sell these things as enlightened self-interest, it's still a good thing. You know, I have no problem with anything you said then. You know, it's...
Well, I am thankful for that, because there has been a lot of times in the past when we've discussed things that you have been able to find holes in what I believed were otherwise fantastic plans and ideas.
Well, you know, I'm sure if I looked really, really hard, I could find one or two. But, you know, I won't. No, I completely agree. Seriously, I completely agree. I think I think that sort of idea is a good idea. I think it's a good idea to look at things slightly differently, you know, and, you know, come out with a different solution. You know? It's up to the pollies.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
But we can always make sure that we let them know what we want.
Oh, look, I let my politicians know all sorts of things all of the time.
I am absolutely sure you do.
I do. I certainly do.
So let's move on now. Let's quickly get into some of the lighter stuff. As I said before, this is our year-end wrap-up show. It is not supposed to be quite as in-depth as a normal show will be. This is our little chance to blow off steam at the end of the year as well. Discuss some of the other things we're interested in. Let's start with sport.
Sport? Love
to
sport.
me, this was... Oh, absolutely. Same here. To me, this was the year of the underdog for sport. This was the year of the drought breaker.
Absolutely. I mean, just everywhere. It was unbelievable. I mean, what have we got?
Let's start at the beginning of the year. We had the Super Bowl where the Denver Broncos beat the Carolina Panthers for the third Super Bowl win ever for the Denver Broncos. Yep. The other two being in 1998 and 1999.
Yep.
So that in itself,
that's pretty good.
You know, that's only, you know.
How long have they been in the comp?
They have been in the comp since before the merger between the AFL and the NFL.
Okay, so a long time.
For a very long time. Mm-hmm. Then we had the Cleveland Cavs.
Yeah.
Cleveland Cavaliers, led by LeBron James and with Australia's own Matthew Dellavedova on the team. Yeah, it takes the Aussie known for the tenacious defense to become the first team in Cleveland to win a championship in over 50 years, to finally break the so-called Cleveland curse.
Yep.
That in itself is absolutely huge. But then we start to look at the baseball, and the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. And when did you say that the last World Series win was?
It was a hell of a long time. It was, from what I understand, the biggest drought in World Series history.
I believe it was the early 1900s, was it? Because I remember we were discussing this.
We were discussing it, and it's completely left my head. 1945 was the last. Well, 1945 was the National League pennant, but the last time they won a World Series was 1908. 1908.
Wow.
Put that into perspective. That's before the First World War. You know, that's a hell of a long time ago, isn't it? You know,
that is 108 years.
You know, that's pretty wow. You know,
that is older than nearly every living person on this planet.
Well, yeah. How old's Betty White? It's older than Betty White. 1922. She was born in 1922. So there you go.
And have you seen that there's a GoFundMe project at the moment to make sure that she stays alive past the end of this year?
Oh, well, yes, I have.
And it is earning tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, I bet it is. Those things always do.
And Keith Richards, of course, is just being left to his own devices because it seems to be working so far.
Hey, look, it is the end of the world if Keith Richards dies because he is indestructible. So,
Absolutely. Well, I'm actually feeling a little bit bad and also a little bit kind of relieved because I've been making a joke for over a decade now that one of the signs of the apocalypse was a Wham reunion tour. And that's, unfortunately, that will no longer be taking place.
Well, that really will be a sign of the apocalypse.
Well, that is true. Of course, not to make too much light of this.
Not to make light of it, but in the spirit of George Michael, who was very self-deprecating himself. So
absolutely,
like to give it a bit, but that one was a sad one for me. I'm a big fan of George Michael. I'm a big fan of his solo stuff.
Absolutely.
Amazing voice. Don't really know what to say about George Michael. Just, I mean,
I always thought that, my personal favourite of his songs was he had a song called Outside.
Oh, yeah.
Which was the first single he released after getting out of prison.
Okay, yeah.
And it was, I always think that one of the measures of a man, or woman, of course, is how they handle the faults that they have previously done. How they have handled the things that they've messed up, and can they acknowledge them and move on? And I thought this is one of the greatest moves ever, where his first single after coming out of prison for that incident in the bathroom, he went out and released a single talking about the joys of having sex outside the bedroom.
Yep.
And not only that, he released a video clip that at the time was one of the first video clips to put same-sex relationships and in such a very positive light. So at the same time as being a little bit of a self-deprecating joke about his own past, he turned that and used it as a positive message of change.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly encourage everybody to go and watch that video clip. It is fantastic. It is absolutely hilarious.
Look,
but of course, speaking of musicians,
I mean, well, hey, just with George Michael, I must say, I if I had to think of a song that I absolutely love for him, and I mean it's probably a deep cut as well, is "Waiting for That Day," which he wrote. Technically, it's co-written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, but I believe the chord and rhythm was just a bit similar to the Stones. You can't always get what you want, so they're included as a co-writer. But it's just, I don't know, there's something about that song, it's just really good lyrics, and I think it just shows a great range. He has such an amazing range. Talking about his range, if you ever watch the, one thing he had was the amazing vocal range.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what people may think of Freddie Mercury and Queen, I think we can all say that Freddie had a pretty damn good range as well.
Absolutely.
Somebody to Love, when George Michael covered that song at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in, 92-ish, he actually sang that higher than Freddie. They actually had to go up a key when they performed that song to fit his range.
Wow.
He doesn't have the power that Freddie had for that, but it was, it was good. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, I felt he did Freddie justice.
For that concert, there wasn't much good in it. So that was it was a bit hodgepodge. There was heart, there was soul in it, but it was a bit hodgepodge. And I'm a huge Queen fan, my favourite band of all time. But the second half of the concert is definitely much better than the first. Between that George Michael song, Somebody to Love, he does a duet with Lisa Stansfield, but the highlight of that concert, completely nothing to do with George Michael, is Elton John and Axl Rose doing Bohemian Rhapsody on stage together. Absolutely the pinnacle. Because they are two artists you would never, ever, ever picture. I dare anyone to tell me that they would have gone, you know what? I think Elton John and Axl Rose should do a... I don't think that was ever planned by anybody ever. And for that to happen, and the interesting story in that, I encourage anyone, check it out on YouTube. I'm sure it's on there. If not, buy the DVD. It's fantastic. This particular thing is when they practiced that song, Axl was typical Axl Rose and didn't show up to any of the rehearsals and just came out on stage for the heavy rock section after the operatic bit in Bohemian Rhapsody and nailed it. And he had, in the previous weeks to that, put out said some things which would probably be offensive to Elton. But none of that seemed to matter. It's just, nothing really matters. To quote the song.
I knew the second that
Queen.
You started that story, that was exactly how you were going to end it too.
Well, anyone can see. Please move on before I keep quoting Queen lyrics.
Anyway, there were to get back to the sports. We had our own fair share of underdogs winning as well.
Oh, hell yes, we did.
We had the Western Bulldogs in the AFL.
Oh, look.
Which, admittedly, I do not follow the AFL.
Okay, well,
but I'm led to believe that it has been 60-odd years.
Look, I was born in Melbourne, so I am certainly an Aussie rules supporter. It is my second code now that I've lived in Queensland a long time, but I still avidly follow it. I was never a fan of Footscray, but that is what any Victorian or AFL person would know is what the Western Bulldogs really are. They're still Footscray. They were a team that had entered the competition in 1870. Well, they were founded in 1877. They entered the national competition in 1925. They've only won 2 premierships, 1954 and this year. So, that's pretty damn impressive.
Absolutely. Also, in the NRL, we had the Sharks getting their first premiership.
Oh, the Sharks. I would put my...
Hold up. Is this going to be a soapbox moment?
Probably.
We about to get a Shawn soapbox?
We're probably going to get a Shawn soapbox. We are talking the NRL. I'm a huge rugby league fan, so it's quite possible that there's a wooden box sitting under my feet right now.
Well, I think if there ever was a case for us to get a soundboard, I think this is where we'd use a little musical sting.
Dun, dun, dun. I'm probably going to cut that. Or maybe not. Okay. Cronulla Sharks. Cronulla Sutherland Sharks. First of all, well done for being in a competition for 50 years and finally winning. There's finally a trophy in the cabinet. I would hang my hat on the peg to say that I think Cronulla would be the most hated team in rugby league.
Even more so than Manly?
Look, I think a lot of the people who used to hate Manly just feel a bit sorry for them now. Maybe they're getting a bit of that back. Maybe they're getting a bit of the hate back. They're not... look, the Sharks are probably not my least favourite team. I've probably got teams I hate less or I hate more than the Sharks. But it's certainly in the hatred area. I don't know. You got to say well done to a team of, I think... How can I put this? To a team without really any genuine superstars. Got a few players that I think will be superstars. Your Valentine Holmes and people like that. I think they will be superstars. I don't think they are. Captain's Paul Gallen. He's also the Blues captain. I'm a Queenslander. Let's just leave that there. I just don't know why the Sharks are still in the competition. There you go, I said it. I don't know why the Sharks are in the competition. After 50...
And what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, firstly, there is too many teams in Sydney. It's a national competition with 16 teams, We've got 3 teams in Queensland. We've got 1 in the ACT, and I'm being generous there and saying that's not part of New South Wales, when we all know it kind of really is. You got 1 in New Zealand, you got 1 in Melbourne, Newcastle, and pretty much the rest are in Sydney, or at least around the Greater Sydney area. I just don't know. There's so many teams in Sydney that you couldn't move. I think, when you're fighting in this day and age for sponsorship dollars at number 1, for junior club members as number 2, and just fans to get to games, people to actually get their bum on a seat to a game, or even get the viewing audience on Channel 9 or Fox or whatever to watch the game. If you had all your teams in Sydney, you're really leaving the rest of the country out. I just think there is too many teams in Sydney. You can't move. I always thought Cronulla were the one team that you could probably move. I don't think they should go. I just think they should be moved in the same way that the Fitzroy Lions were moved in the AFL to Brisbane and became a very successful franchise in Brisbane.
So where do you think there is an opening for a team right now?
I think we need a team. If we're the National Rugby League, it's the NRL. We simply need a team in Perth. Perth has a massive, massive junior base. It used to have an NRL team, or ARL, or Super League, or whatever the hell it was. But, up until the end of the Super League war, when it was one of the casualties, we had the Western Reds over there. We had, massive junior bases, a pretty good stadium over there as well. You've also got the advantage for TV audiences that a Perth game can be broadcast live to the eastern states at a 2-hour difference. So you're going to be able to broadcast 2 games live, or even 3 games live back to back on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon or something.
Which is one thing that I will say as an NFL fan, a gridiron fan, that is something that they have got down pat in America.
Yeah.
Is they have a bunch of games at the one time slot early in the afternoon on a Sunday. Then they have a second group of games that start just as the first games finish, and then they have a main event game at the end of the night, which is a third game in a row, which starts about 45 minutes after the second group of games finish. And I think it makes for an amazing day of viewing if you were into that particular sport.
Absolutely. And I think that's just a missed opportunity. You could really open up the viewing figures. I mean, the NRL got over $1 billion in the last TV rights agreement. So don't tell me that they aren't still looking for ways to expand that audience. They expand that audience, they get even more money next time.
What about as an alternative? Perhaps the NRL just have 2 teams every week play a game in Perth until they can get something organised.
Well, I think that's up to the clubs, the way the NRL works. From what I understand, South Sydney, I believe, take a game to Perth every year. We do play the occasional game in Perth, and they are pretty well supported in the mid sort of teens, like 15,000 people go to the games, which is not too bad considering that's what the sort of Sydney clubs get. I don't know. I don't think that's fair to... I don't know.
Your home supporters?
I don't think it's fair to your home supporters. I do think the competition's too long. I think 26 weeks is way too long. It's 24... I think it's 24 rounds, but 26 weeks.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you there.
That's too long. It should be cut down to about 20. But
I'd even go to 18, to be honest. Let's start looking at creating divisions up.
Well, that's what Super League was about, wasn't it? Super League was going to be a top-tier competition that you could relegate down to the old ARL.
Well, I don't mean divisions as in this is, Division 1 and this is the top teams and then Division 2. I mean more in the way that, say, the NBA or the NFL have divisions of these, like in the NFL, you've got the NFC North Division, which is my Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions, and the Chicago Bears. And they play, every year, they play each other twice, one at each team's...
home and away,
home and away. and then you play then you play another team and another division. You play one game against them, and then you play X amount of games against another teams in another division as well. And I think that what this leads to is, and bearing in mind, it's only a 17-week season, 16 games over 17 weeks for the NFL for 32 teams.
Yeah.
So yes, not every team plays each other every year, but what that does is it develops rivalries between the teams within their divisions.
Yeah.
I mean, the Packers-Vikings rivalry is absolutely huge, as is the Cowboys-Giants rivalry. And what we get out of that is also then the once every 4 years at the most, because the NFL has a very weird scheduling system where you also play the teams that ranked at the same point of their division. You have to play the teams that won. If you win your division, you have to play the teams that won their divisions as well.
Okay, yeah.
And if you come second in the division, you've got to play the teams that came second in their divisions.
Okay.
So they have a really weird, complicated system for that. But the way it works is that the longest you can go without playing a team is 4 years.
Yep.
Is 4 seasons. So what that means is, say if I'm Green Bay and we had a horrible... When we beat the pants off, say, Dallas in the playoffs, in a one-and-done playoff series, we knocked out Dallas. And we don't play them for another 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By the time that game comes along, they're hungry for it. The Dallas fans are hungry for revenge. Yeah. They want to see... They remember that we beat the pants off Dallas, so they want to see Dallas come back into Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and put on a hell of a show. And the Dallas players want it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of intense rivalries that the NRL really needs more of.
Well, if you were to division up the NRL like that into say pools of 4, would you put the 3 Queensland teams in a division?
Absolutely.
With I don't know, maybe New Zealand or something?
Absolutely. The three Queensland teams in New Zealand in one division.
Or give us 4 Queensland teams, whatever.
Still pushing for CQ bid, hey?
I actually am not really that interested in a CQ bid. I know I live in Rockhampton, and I probably shouldn't say that. I'll probably be lynched, but I just... We can't get a QRL team to perform well on a consistent basis. So I don't know how we're going to get an NRL team.
That is fair enough. But let's not dwell on that one.
No, let's not dwell on that.
Let's not dwell on that. We've spoken about the football for quite a while.
Yeah.
I had one more thing that I really wanted to do this episode, and that was what did you think your best ofs for this year were?
Ooh, best ofs.
So,
love
best ofs.
Yep.
Best ofs. So first up, best TV show. Best new TV show.
Best new TV show.
Debuted in 2016.
It's not a big, deep, serious show, and they're the ones I usually watch. I like the dramas and that sort of stuff, but I really, really enjoyed The Ranch on Netflix, which is the Ashton Kutcher, Danny Madison sitcom.
I have heard a lot of good things about this.
Very, very good. And what I particularly liked about it was that they didn't... Because, I mean, for people who haven't seen it, the basic setup is it's these 2 brothers, obviously Danny Madison and Ashton Kutcher. Ashton Kutcher had been away pursuing a football career, failed, came back to the ranch, Southern America. Very sort of Republican-leaning area, which is one thing I liked, because very rare in Hollywood would you see anything except, the blue states recognised. They don't go on about it, but it's there. It's very real acting in the show. It's like, they're having an argument, and because it's on Netflix, there's no censorship or anything like that. They're having an argument, and one brother will just go, "Oh, I'll just F off." And that's what would actually happen in real life, and that's what I appreciated about the show. It wasn't contrived. in those respects. It was very much just, this is actually what would happen if that situation occurred. Now, honestly, some of the situations were ridiculous, but that's the sort of stuff that Ashton Kutcher generally does when it comes to the sitcom type thing. So that's probably my original show for the year. What was yours?
I would have to go with Westworld.
Oh, Westworld. Okay, yeah.
I know it's, some people might say, oh, that's a very mainstream pick for you, but it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. It kept you guessing the entire way through the first season, and I'm so disappointed I'm going to have to wait till January 2018 for the second season.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins was just outstanding. Yeah, he gave an outstanding performance in it as Dr. Ford, I believe. If you haven't seen Westworld, do yourself a favor right now and go and watch it. It is that perfect mix of science fiction and Western that we've been missing for quite a few years.
Since Firefly was cancelled. Boom!
Yes, since Firefly. And just quickly mentioning Firefly, another one of our terrible deaths for this year was Mr. Ron Glass.
Yes.
Which is probably one of the ones that hit me a lot more than a lot of the other ones did, because Firefly has always held a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
And I'm still one of those people who is fervently hoping that Netflix will bring it back.
Well, one thing Netflix does is it brings back shows, and it brings them back well.
Okay, so what do you have now? We've done television shows. What have you got for movies?
Oh, for movies, I'm going to be controversial here. Batman, Superman. Absolutely loved it.
That's a very big call.
It is a very big call because I've seen it, that movie copped a lot of hate. It made a lot of money at the box office, I might add, which is always an interesting, conundrum when that happens. It makes a lot of money at the box office, but it gets a lot of critical hate.
A la Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad, which I haven't seen yet, actually. I've got it queued up to watch, but we just haven't got around to it yet. But
it is absolutely worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
But as a film, it is very, very, very flawed.
Yeah.
In my opinion, of course.
Look, I can always look past a bit of that with superhero movies because they're superhero movies.
Exactly. They're supposed to be fun.
I honestly find the Marvel movies to be a bit... It's hard to describe. It's not that I don't like them, because I certainly do. Doctor Strange was one that came out this year, which was great. But, or Guardians of the Galaxy was maybe last year. But I always find them it's a bit like eating dessert. They're great, but they're dessert. They're not filling. I found these new, the Man of Steel and then Superman, Batman, to be more of a main meal. A bit more gritty. I don't know. I just really liked them. I think they were very, very... I think it was very good. Ben Affleck was absolutely not the person I would ever in my life have chosen to play Batman. And I would go as far to say that he is the single best Batman to appear on screen. He was amazing. I loved the fact that it was an older Batman with sort of a younger Superman, younger Flash, younger Aquaman, Wonder Woman, all the others that are in it. They were all a bit younger, and he's sort of the older, wiser head that's been through it. He's lost a Robin and all of that sort of stuff, and he is absolutely brilliant in it. Absolutely brilliant.
I will absolutely agree with you on that one, even if just want to use the word absolutely yet again.
Yeah.
But Ben Affleck was very much a high point.
Yep.
As I think Gal Gadot was very much a high point as well.
Oh, yes.
I have my issues with that film.
Mm-hmm.
But in saying that, and this is something that I think we're forgetting in society at the moment as well, just because I didn't think a lot of that film, just because I didn't particularly enjoy that film, there is absolutely no reason why you should have that opinion as well. There is no reason why you shouldn't enjoy it.
Yep. No, I agree. Completely agree.
And I think that's something that we need to remember a little bit more in society these days as well.
Mm.
Just because You know, you see it in the gaming community a lot. You know, where there's a lot of hate on stuff like Call of Duty and Madden.
Yep.
Because they don't like the people that play these games.
Yeah. Well.
And that's one thing that we need to remember is just because we don't like the same stuff, just because I didn't enjoy Batman versus Superman, doesn't mean that there's any reason why Shawn shouldn't be allowed to enjoy the hell out of it if he did.
Yeah. I completely agree. What's your movie?
I wanted to say Captain America Civil War.
Okay, yeah.
Because now, I will say, I don't watch a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
I generally, when I do watch movies, it's either going to be a science fiction or it's going to be a comic book film.
Yep.
Because I enjoy the hell out of both.
Fair enough.
But I'm going to go with Deadpool.
Okay.
Purely because I have been, and it's not the best film out there. It's not the most well done film.
Oh, come on, it's pretty damn close.
It's done very well. Don't get me wrong, but it's not perfect. It's it's got its issues. But for me, to see a lesser known, to see a cult fan favorite, a character that I have loved for decades, that I never thought would ever be given his own film, that I never thought would cross over to the mainstream in my life, to see this character I love hit the big screen, and not only that, be loved by absolutely nearly everyone as well.
Yeah.
This feels and to be done justice.
Oh, and it was done justice.
It was done justice. This is one of the greatest feelings. It feels like I'm sharing something with the world that I've always loved. Now the rest of the world's getting to see it, and now I'm getting to say, "Hey, this is something I've always loved. I hope you guys I'm so glad to see that you guys are enjoying it as well."
Yeah.
You know, I've never understood. Back in the late '90s, early 2000s, there was this very big thing. You know, I was into alternative music, and in the rock and roll scene, it was people would be diehard fans of a band, and then as soon as the band got mainstream attention, they're like, you sold out. I don't like them. Those guys sold out.
I am with you on that.
I have never understood that mindset, because if Deadpool was a rock band from the late 90s, this would be where everyone would be, all its old fans would be saying, "Oh, Deadpool sold out."
Yeah.
But in reality, it's not that. It's a fantastic feeling where I can now share something that's been so underground that I've never been able to talk about. And now I can go out there and I can talk to people.
Yeah.
This is something I've now got in common with so many people that I normally would not have ever had an opportunity to speak with.
Yep.
And that's one thing. That is why I'm putting this film as my favourite film of this year.
No, mate, I agree. And I tell you what, just slightly less on him, but I think Ryan Reynolds, absolute revelation in that role.
Absolutely.
Didn't expect.
Ryan Reynolds was born to play that character.
He was, and unbelievably so. You know, I've always been a big fan of Ryan Reynolds. He's had his flops in superhero movies, but this was one that, you know, he nailed it. He absolutely, you could tell he had a passion for it. You know,
absolutely.
He owned the film rights for that for like 10 years or something before he made the film, didn't he? Something like that. So
that is what he spent his earnings from Van Wilder on.
Yeah,
to buy the film rights to Deadpool.
Well, you know, good on him. Lived his dream and did it.
The funny thing is, the first time I saw Deadpool, the first time I saw Van Wilder when it came out, one of my first thoughts was, "Geez, this guy would make a good Deadpool." And I'm very glad that it turned out that way.
Can't say he'd make a good Green Lantern.
Actually, I really thoroughly enjoyed the hell out of that film.
You know what? It wasn't as bad as people say it was. It had its flaws, but it wasn't as bad as. I think that goes back to a bit of what you were saying just a second ago. You know, people have this attitude, and I think it comes down to that with the DC movies. If there's a DC movie, it's suddenly it's never going to be as good because the Marvel movies are the best. I think there's a bit of that when it comes to the DC Marvel movies, but
I
anyway.
think there is a bit of that, because there's always going to be that DC Marvel argument.
Yep. But I'll give DC
there's-
this. They nail the TV shows better than Marvel. So.
Again, I don't know if I agree with that.
Really?
I've thoroughly enjoyed Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yep, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
probably-
is great, yeah.
Probably one of my favourite shows to watch every week, especially this season so far.
Yep.
And yet I find Arrow to be a complete slog.
Oh, really?
And
I like Arrow. So.
I've watched up to maybe about halfway through the 4th season of Arrow so far.
Okay.
And I've found it to be... Like, I'll give them a pass on the first season, because the first season just seemed like the OC in masks.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I'll give them a pass on that. But since then, I've found it to be a bit of a hard slog viewing.
Okay, fair enough.
Because they've more focused on love lives still, even now. It's to where I am at, it's the same will they, won't they. You know, with Oliver and one person, and then Oliver and another person, and then Oliver and a third person.
Yeah.
It's like I'm sick of this revolving door love triangle that's happening in there. They just need to kind of go,
just do it.
It's not relevant.
No.
It's not that important. We're not watching to see if Oliver and Felicity get together, or if Oliver and Laurel get together, or if who and whoever get together. We're watching because it's a comic book show. We want to see
I like
action.
the flashbacks in it. That's my favourite part, to be honest. I love the flashback stuff. So
the flashbacks are a fantastic plot device that they use.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to see. One thing I will give them is they're not dumbing it down. They're not dumbing it down. They're giving you two separate stories and showing those minute ways that they interrelate to each other.
Yeah. So,
anyway,
okay.
Best computer game of 2016.
I'm going to go with Uncharted 4. I have been in love with the Uncharted games on the PlayStation for a long time. I recently rebought the first 3, the remastered first 3. You can get them as a collection now for the PS4. And I love the combination of action adventure, a bit third-person shooter, very, very well written. But Uncharted 4 has an amazingly good story that builds upon the first 3, and I just think it's an exceptionally fun game to play. It's hard, but it's not so difficult you can't finish it. You know, I hate that in games that is just, you've got to find a balance, and I think there's a good balance in that game between difficult and fun. And those games, as a series, but particularly Thief's End, number 4, amazing. Amazing game. What about you? You got one?
Yeah, No Man's Sky. No, I'm kidding.
No Man's
I'm
Sky?
kidding.
Okay.
No, I'm absolutely kidding. I actually want to give this one out as a tie between two games. The first one is Civilization 6.
Okay.
I believe now I have played the Civilization series since the first one was released in 1992. I have spent many thousands of hours playing this series.
I know the feeling.
Well, especially being a teenage boy on a tropical island in the middle of nowhere with no one else my own age.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time playing video games, and Civilization 2 probably in itself counts for close to 2,000 hours of my life. But Civilization 6 is so much fun. It is a game that is easy to drop into.
Yep.
And that's something that the Civilization series always has had an issue with.
Yeah.
Even for older players, people who once you got used to the previous iteration, the new iteration wasn't fun because it took too much to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Civ 6, you can just drop in and have fun straight up.
Yep.
It is fantastic. The art direction is a nice take.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going realistic, which they've been trying to get, closer to realism every game in the series. This time they have just gone with cartoony, pretty colours.
Good.
And it is a very nice change.
Okay.
And every time I have a diplomatical meeting with Cleopatra, I swear she is checking out my junk.
Well, that's what you want in a game.
Absolutely. But the other game that I'm going to say is tied with it this year is Madden 17.
Okay. And how is Madden 17 different from Madden 16, 15, 14, and 13?
Well, I didn't play much of those, the earlier iterations, because this is the first year I've actually had a console since the PlayStation 2.
Okay.
And this year, a few months ago, this year I bought a Wii U and I bought a PlayStation 4.
Yep.
And what I want to say for Madden 17 is, as a football fan, as a gridiron fan, it has not only given me hours of entertainment to just playing the game, but it has taught me so much about the game that I already knew a lot about this game, but it has taught me so much more about what to look for when watching the game. It has taught me so much more, as like when you hear announcers who've played the game all their life speaking to viewers who've played the game all their lives. It gives you a nice bridge between just being into the sport and having a knowledge for it.
Yeah.
And I think that is, if you can play a game or watch a film or watch a TV show or listen to a record that makes you a better person, or gives you a skill set, or makes you think, or teaches you something, then that's a damn good thing that you can get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus, this year with the Madden Ultimate Team, which is the collectible card game portion of it.
Yeah.
Just like FIFA Ultimate Team or My Team on NBA 2K. This year it has introduced the concept of moments, and these aren't full games, these are just challenges where you might be down 8 points with 1 quarter to go, or you might be up by 2 points with 5 minutes and you're in on defense and you've got to stop your opponent from scoring. And just these are nice little touches that if you don't have the time to play a full game, which, let's face it, a lot of the time you might not, you can just go in there, sit down, quickly bash out 1 or 2 of these little moment challenges and have a ball.
Yep. So what you're saying is it's just fun.
Absolutely. It's fun, and it's making me a more intelligent football fan.
Well, I think that pretty much ticks all the boxes then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, we're going to wrap this show up now. Shawn, once again, thank you for joining me.
Mate, pleasure as always.
And I'd just like to give a very quick shout out to my friends Hank McCoy and Vince Germano over at the Courtside Podcast. They're Australia's best NBA podcast. So if you're a fan of basketball, fan of the NBA, or just want to hear a bunch of guys yelling at each other about their love of DeMarcus Cousins and Enes Kanter, please check them out. That is all caps Courtside on Facebook. They have some free minisodes that you can check out. Shawn, was there anything you wanted to leave us with today?
No, I guess just if you have anything that you would like us to talk about, if you have any, we'll talk about anything. We do tend to stick to sort of politics and current affairs and that sort of thing. But, as you can see by this episode, we have a very wide range of interests, eclectic tastes, as I like to say. So
Absolutely.
If you would like us to talk about anything, or you have a theory or something you'd like us to discuss, drop us a line on any of our social media or email or YouTube or whatever the heck you want to contact us on. We read it all, and we will endeavour to have a chat about it.
Absolutely. And if you could all do us a small favour and please leave a review on iTunes. That helps us out greatly. If you would like to introduce us to your friends, please feel free to share us on Facebook, share us on Twitter. We would very much appreciate that as well. So from Shawn and I and everyone backstage at the AustrAlien podcast, we'd just like to say we hope you guys have a fantastic 2017, and we'll see you all in the New Year's. Thank you very much.